On this episode of Wengel's Workshop, I'll be building a potting shelf for my neighbor. For this build, I'll be using cedar wood, and I purchased 10 8-foot 1x6s and 2 8-foot 2x4s. I'll start off by making the legs out of the 2x4s by cutting them down into 4 equal lengths of 34 inches. Now I'll measure out and rip the 1x6s down into 3 equal parts. These will pretty much be used to build the rest of the shelf. I'll cut most of these pieces down into 4-foot lengths and a few of them into 2-foot lengths. This is roughly the length and width of the potting shelf. Since I'm done using power tools for a bit, I'll go ahead and bring my pup outside so he can hang out with me. Now I'll use my Kreg jig to start building frames for all 3 of the shelves. If you're unfamiliar with the Kreg jig, it's a simple way of making pocket holes in varying thicknesses of wood. You don't need a Kreg jig to make pocket holes, but it does make things a little bit easier. Now I'll go ahead and screw all 3 of these frames together, making sure that they're square and flush. Once I'm done framing all of the shelves, I'll start routering the faces of the slats that will make up the top of the shelf. And the reason I chose slats instead of a solid piece of wood is because it'll allow for water drainage since this will be kept outside. I'll glue and nail all the slats in place using a piece of wood as a spacer to keep them spaced evenly all the way down. For the last piece, I'll measure the remainder, subtract the spacer length from that, and then rip it down in the table saw. And then I'll use a nail punch to sink all the nail heads that didn't sink all the way. And then I'll repeat this process on the other 2 shelves. On top of this potting shelf, there's going to be a 4th smaller shelf, and I need to glue up 2 pieces, which will actually make the verticals to hold this shelf in place. You'll see how it works out later in the build. Once the glue is done drying, I'll cut this piece in half and then mark out the shape that I need to cut out, and then I'll cut it out using my crosscut sled and my bandsaw. Once the shapes are roughly cut out on the bandsaw, I'll use my belt sander to bring them up to the line. Now I'll mark out and cut down the actual shelf itself. Now I need to cut off the corners of the shelf because I made a notch in the uprights, and this will allow for this piece to sit inside that notch. I'll generally cut the board a little bit too big, and then I'll use a file to hone it in. Now I'll wood fill the nail holes and give everything a light sanding. I'm really not going to spend too much time sanding though, because it's an outdoor potting shelf and it's going to get painted. Now I'll set all the pieces up outside so that I can paint them with my spray rig. I'll paint the back side first, give it some time to dry, flip everything over, and then paint the front side. When you do this, you don't really see it in the video, but you need to make sure that you walk all the way around and paint all the different angles. Spray from every single angle so that you don't miss anything. Now it's time for assembly. The most important part in this step is making sure that everything is square, especially the legs to the top. The other thing that's really important is making sure that everything is symmetrically spaced out. I'm going to be installing wheels on the bottom, so I'm using my marking gauge to mark the center of the 2x4s. Now I'm going to install a few lattice-like decorative pieces on the back edge. Now I'm going to install plant hooks on both sides of the bench and then do the final paint touch-up. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. And if you want to be notified every time I upload, hit that notification bell. If you have something you'd like to see me build in the future, feel free to leave it in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching.